as I was introduced, my name is Tomo Sugimoto, and I currently work as a UX researcher at EPAM Systems, which is a huge company that provides consulting, digital consulting to a variety of companies in the world. Before working at EPAM, I worked at companies also as a UX researcher, such as at companies like Round Feather and Microsoft. But my previous career was in academia. So I served as a postdoc at Yale University for a year in the environmental humanities. So my academic background is kind of in anthropology and social sciences through and through. I got my PhD at Stanford University, and I did my doctoral fieldwork in the city of Taipei in Taiwan, looking at indigenous struggles for land and space. These are some of the people, lovely people that I got to work with that I deeply miss. Also at Stanford, I was really lucky that I was able to do some UX research and design research related projects because Stanford has this really amazing design school called the D School. There were a lot of related courses. And before Stanford, I got my MA, also in anthropology at UC San Diego. And I went to college in Tokyo, at the University of Tokyo. So today we don't have that much time, so I will try to be very brief, but I will cover three things in my talk. First, what is UX research? What is this field? And secondly, I will talk about the relationship between anthropology and UX research, how anthropology translates to UX research, or how it might not, and how anthropologists might have to adapt to many different things in the field of UX research. And finally, I will discuss in detail how to get a job in UX research. So the last part will be very, very practical. So yeah, let's start with what is UX research, right? And since this is an anthro crowd, I can nerd out a little bit. And I would say that UX research is a floating signifier, right? So I think so many people kind of use it to refer to kind of very different things, right? So, and I don't necessarily feel that there is one kind of unified definition of what UX research is. But you know, UX stands for user experience, right? So I think the kind of broadest, simplest definition that I can give is that UX research is, research conducted to improve the experience of users and people, right? Whether it relates to a digital product like a mobile app or a particular kind of service, right? Like how people experience customer service at a courtroom or something, right? So it can be kind of like service design. And I think one kind of rookie mistake that many people make is to confuse UX and UI, right? UI stands for user interface. And yes, UX research often does focus on kind of improving things related to user interfaces, but user interface designers and UX researchers often do very different things, and UI designers kind of actually design things using like design software, and that's not really what UX researchers do. We primarily just do research and don't really get involved in design, right? So UX research is also really different from UX design, which focuses on design. I think another kind of confusion that often exists is like UX research is confused with market research, market research is a very different field, I would say. It can be also called consumer insights research or customer insights research, but usually market research or CX research is very quantitative, and you look at a lot of like Excel spreadsheets, and you do like huge surveys with like 5,000 people. And I would say UX research is usually on a smaller scale. So that's kind of important when you're looking for a job, and in terms of how you market yourself and how you build your kind of personal brand, so to speak, or how you kind of think about skills that you need to acquire to succeed in a particular field, whether it's UX research or market research. And I often get asked, what kind of projects do I do or have I done as a UX researcher? So I will just kind of go through 4 different projects very quickly, like 4 projects that I have done as a UX researcher. So the first case study I did was about investor attitudes, right? And this project lasted for about 1.5 months. I conducted this with multiple researchers. And basically this project was done for a financial services client. So they wanted to understand kind of what investors are kind of thinking about when it comes to like money, investment, and so on. So research, a couple of my colleagues and I conducted a bunch of in-depth interviews with American investors, ranging in age, income, and assets under management. And as a result of this research, we were able to identify shifting attitudes toward investment, money-related tools, and financial institutions. And it's unfortunate that I can't really go into the details of these projects because of non-disclosure agreements that I have signed. But I can kind of stay at this kind of very abstract level. Another project I did was with a different client, and this was with a SaaS or software as a service client. So a client in the technology sector. And this was about this software company's customer support, right? So like, as in kind of support that you reach when you have issues, right? You might call them in, or you might email them. So to understand kind of why this client's customer support was kind of creating so many pain points for both customers and engineers who work for this company, we interviewed both engineers and customers, and kind of did this journey map, kind of tracing where pain points arise for both engineers and customers. And by kind of walking through this journey with the client that asked us to do this project, we were able to influence the strategy roadmaps of the customer support organization of this company. So these 2 projects are kind of anthropological and kind of really interesting in that they were both about kind of the big picture question. But I would say that a lot of research that UX researchers do can be fairly like tedious in that it's more about kind of evaluating an existing product and like fixing little problems that exist or kind of bugs, or just kind of like icons or kind of small design interaction issues that exist, right? So like another like case study that I can talk about is this like study that I did on keyboard shortcuts. And this was a really short-term project, and I did this for an interaction designer. And because I was working on this piece of like software, I helped the designer kind of understand if certain keyboard shortcuts that the designer was trying to implement kind of fit users' mental models about shortcuts, right? So you can kind of tell how this project is a little bit different from the two projects that I discussed. This project was more kind of about a very specific design interaction problem. And what I did was to run like a concept testing, usability testing study on this platform called usertesting.com, which is widely used in the field of UX research. And another kind of more evaluative project that I can talk about is this like icon testing study that I have done. And again, like this was conducted for an interaction designer or an interaction design team, I should say. And basically, like the goal of the study was to examine if certain icons that the team was trying to implement in certain software would make sense to kind of users of clinical software, right? So kind of similarly to case study number 3, I ran a survey on user Zoom, another platform widely used in UX research, and kind of tested various icons and if users can understand them easily. So yeah, this kind of should give you a sense of a variety of projects that UX researchers get to do. And like what kind of projects you do is highly dependent on what kind of company you work for, or like even like what particular team you're assigned to within a particular company, because companies like Google, Microsoft, and Facebook have, really like dozens of different teams, and what each team kind of does significantly differs, right? So like each researcher's responsibilities can be really different. All right, so moving on to kind of the relationship between anthropology and UX research. I will start by talking about maybe, why anthropologists would make good UX researchers, right? And how anthropology translates into UX research. I think, first of all, anthropologists tend to be really self-reflexive about our positionality as researchers, right? And our own research practice. And I think this is because of what happened after, writing culture in the 80s and so on. But I think that's really unique among different social sciences, I would say. And I think it's a really important mindset that UX or anthropologists can bring to UX research, precisely because I think a lot of UX researchers don't necessarily think about kind of our positionality as kind of researchers, right? Like, or like how who we are might influence how we look at things or how we talk to people, how we kind of think about the data that we have collected. And I think it's a very important mindset and skill set that we can bring to UX research. And that's also something that I'm trying to do as an anthropologist in UX research, because I think some of the colleagues that I have worked with haven't really thought that much about kind of their own positionality in relation to research participants or research projects. And I think another great skill set that anthropologists can utilize in UX research is really the ability to listen, right? And I think we are really good at kind of suspending judgment and just kind of listen to people and listen to what they have to say and really kind of try to understand things from their perspective. And I think that's really important when you're working as a UX researcher and when you have to kind of convey your findings or share your findings with stakeholders. Because you have to be the advocate of users. You have to report like pain points or problems that stakeholders might not necessarily want to hear about, but utilizing that kind of listening skill that you have, you're really able to kind of generate really important insights that stakeholders can use. I think another really great skill set that many anthropologists possess is the ability to synthesize really complex data, right? Especially qualitative data, obviously. And I think working in industry, I have realized that that's not necessarily a skill set that many people have, right? To kind of feel comfortable in the complexity of data and kind of try to sit with it and try to identify kind of patterns or interesting insights in kind of dozens of pages of notes or hours of video recordings. So I think that's a great skill that anthropologists kind of naturally learn through our training that we can then apply to UX research. And I think, and lastly, I think our reading ability can be really, really useful, right? Because I mean, at least as a PhD student in anthropology, I had to read like 500 books, and I had to like constantly write summaries of like really difficult books. And I think, kind of connected to that synthesis skill, but I think like kind of just being able to read things well and being able to capture kind of key insights and also kind of doing desktop research really quickly about like a design concept or an interaction model that you're not really familiar with, but kind of getting a good understanding of it really quickly. I think that really takes you very far when you are working in industry as well. So yeah, if you're a master's student or a PhD student and reading like hundreds of books right now for your qualifying exams or something, I don't think that's completely wasteful. But I want to kind of move on to how anthropology might not necessarily translate into UX research, or how like anthropologists might have to adapt to kind of different things in UX research, right? So anthropology kind of prides itself on being the kind of what's the right word? Like, we are really proud of our craft of ethnography, right? Being able to do ethnography and being able to do in-depth interviews and observation and so on. But in UX research, yes, ethnography is sometimes used, but it's really just one of many, many different research methodologies that are used. So you have to be able to do things like benchmarking, which is, to compare different kinds of products and kind of benchmarking each of them against kind of certain standards. Or you have to do a lot of quantitative surveys depending on the team that you're working with. And you might have to do things like diary studies, or you have to do heuristic evaluations, and it's okay if you don't know any of these methods. You can quickly learn, I think, if you have solid kind of a solid foundation in anthropology. But that's something to remember. Like, you have to be able to pick up other research methodologies and just not just completely rely on ethnography and interviewing alone. And I think another big difference between anthropology and UX research is you have to work with people from extremely different backgrounds, right? Who don't know anything about anthropology, or who have never taken like a social science class or humanities class, right? And you have to, usually like your closest collaborators are designers, right? Interaction designers usually, but sometimes visual designers. You might also have to convey your findings to engineers, and you often have to work with PMs, like product managers, who kind of, shepherd through various projects. And I think sometimes UX researchers collaborate with strategists, kind of people who come up with kind of business strategies. So all of these people have very different understandings about the world, right? And they have very different skill sets from you. So that's, I think, something that's really different from being in anthropology, because when you're in anthropology, I think you tend to just speak to anthropologists, or people in other closely related disciplines. So that's very different in UX research. And you also work with other researchers, or often you work with other researchers, but you also have to remember that you usually end up working with researchers with very different research skill sets or different research assumptions, right? And it's really because I think UX research is predominantly shaped by ideas in like psychology, human-computer interaction, and human factors, right? And I think kind of HCI and human factors tend to have tend to be kind of shaped by psychology and its assumptions and ideas, I think. So yeah, basically you end up working with a lot of psychologists in UX research. And usually psychologists are, their research is driven by kind of questions around cognition and perception, right? And I think they sometimes have very different ideas about humans, because anthropologists are naturally interested in humans as kind of social and cultural beings, right? People in context, people who are shaped by kind of various forces in the world, such as race, capitalism, colonialism, and so on. But I think psychology's assumptions about people are different, and I hope I'm not offending any psychologists in the audience. But I think they tend to be more interested in humans as kind of biological beings, right? They kind of want to strip people kind of out of a social and cultural context and see them as kind of biological beings with perception and cognition. So I think that's where sometimes tension begins to arise between anthropology and psychology. So a lot of UX researchers with a psychology background, care about research in like really different ways from anthropologists. So like I think a lot of questions I've had with like more psychology oriented UX researchers are about the kind of screener. So like what kind of research participants should we recruit, and how can we kind of eliminate people who we don't want from our research projects. So and I think that's really because of like how psychology thinks about bias, right? Psychologists are really good at kind of identifying like bias and how that comes into research, right? Because their discipline is really about kind of creating controlled experimental environments and removing bias. So I think in anthropology, like I don't really feel that I kind of talked a lot about bias, right? And instead kind of our assumption was like, yeah, we are all biased beings, right? Because we are kind of culturally, socially, politically, and economically shaped in different ways. So we have to be just reflexive about kind of our practice and our positionality. But I think there are different conversations about bias when you're working in industry with like psychology-minded researchers. I think they think about kind of positionality and bias really differently. So I touched on the subjectivity part of things too. I think sometimes people don't necessarily talk that much about our researchers' positionality or subjectivity that much. And I think there's still this assumption that researchers can be kind of completely objective, right? and kind of outside of the social cultural complexity that we are part of. So that's kind of the relationship between anthropology and UX research, and or it's maybe some of the tension that I've come to identify between the two fields. So I want to close. I want to just make sure we have time. Okay, it's still 2:30. I want to spend about 5 minutes kind of giving you guys really practical advice about how to get into this field, right? So I think one of the biggest things is you shouldn't be a one-trick pony, right? And I think when anthropologists try to transition into UX research, we tend to emphasize our qualitative and usually ethnographic skills, right? And like, yes, your ethnographic and interviewing skills are really important, but to be able to kind of be a successful UX researcher, you have to know other methods as well, right? And I kind of showed you guys what some of those methods are, like diary studies, heuristic evaluations, surveys. Yeah, and I think it's simply because often a lot of companies don't have time or money to invest in like a long-term project that involves ethnography, because ethnography takes time. And think about also the current pandemic context. Like, how do you do ethnography well? It's really extremely challenging to do ethnography in this kind of environment, right? Where you can't necessarily be in person in the kind of environment that you want to observe or you want to spend time in. So you have to learn those like different UX methodologies, and you have to kind of start cultivating respect and appreciation for different kinds of methodologies, right? So of course, like, we love doing ethnography, we love doing interviewing. We might be kind of skeptical of the validity of some other research methodologies, but you have to kind of remember that, like, yeah, psychologists have spent like decades perfecting survey science. So like, what can we learn from them, right? What can like surveys do that in-depth interviewing cannot do? Like, you kind of have to respect other kinds of researchers, non-anthropological researchers, and their research craft as well, right? And so please, like, anthropologists, young anthropologists, like, learn quantitative skills. If you're still in school, do please take classes in statistics and survey design, because those would be really, really helpful. And like, those are things that you cannot learn once you graduate. Like, it's really hard to learn survey science once you graduate, because like, it's just a very academic skill, right? It's not quite like diary studies or heuristic evaluations that you can kind of pick up easily in industry. Surveys are very difficult to do well. A lot of people do surveys, but they're hard to master, I think. And you also have to work a lot with designers. So if you're still in school, please go take a class in like the design department or the design school. Just take design 101 or something. It'd be really helpful to know like the difference between visual design, interaction design, and kind of, yeah, how designers think. Learn, yeah, it'd be really helpful to learn about things like colors and iconography and typography and those things, because you have to kind of talk to designers and you have to be able to convey your findings well to them. And another related thing, you should always consider yourself as a generalist. In anthropology, we tend to kind of focus on very narrow specialties that we kind of have kind of dedicate our life to, right? So like, I was like, oh, like, I'm an anthropologist of East Asia, interested in indigenous studies and like settler colonialism. And it's just, yes, like, I know you are a really great expert of development in Southern Africa, or like, I know you know so much about like adoption in Morocco, and that's amazing. But like, in UX research, you're considered to be just a general researcher who's really good at research. So I would try to kind of emphasize your generalist skills as a researcher, rather than kind of your area or topic expertise. And you might end up being really lucky, and you might be able to like utilize your very kind of special expertise in a particular project. But I think it's more likely that you have to work on kind of projects that have nothing to do with what you have done in grad school. So that's really important. And I think mastering the UX lingo is really important. So like treat this like picking up a field language or doing preliminary analysis. There are so many great resources online. There are lots of free like blog articles and Medium articles. Those are usually the best resources to learn about just the field of UX and like what kind of words we are using to like talk to each other about what we do, right? And I think one thing I did was like to make a little UX dictionary for myself. So like whenever I encountered words that I didn't really understand, like I would just kind of do research on those words or concepts and just kind of make my own dictionary so that I can kind of go back to it occasionally, or I can, so that I could like look at it during interviews and so on. And it's really important to kind of craft your resume using the kind of UX lingo, because that kind of shows to recruiters and hiring managers that you know UX, right? And if you are a student, please get an internship. Try to get an internship. Like top companies like Facebook, Google, and those companies have UX research internships. Some smaller, less famous companies also do. I think internships are a really great way to just kind of learn about UX research and how things work in a corporate setting as well. So if you're not sure about your career, like it's a great way to kind of be able to tell if this is the thing that you want to do, right? There are like university recruiters who kind of specifically focus on recruiting like interns and recent graduates. So like talk to them on LinkedIn. You can also even cold call or cold email small agencies. Like it might be easier to set up like your own internship with smaller companies. You cannot really do that with big companies, but with small agencies, you might be able to. And I think contracting work or agency work can be a stepping stone, or like it can be a really great way to get your foot in the door. I think one mistake that many like anthropologists make is like they just start applying for like fancy UX researcher roles at big companies like Amazon, Facebook, Google, like when they have no industry experience. And that's kind of bound to fail because they don't necessarily hire people without any experience. But when you are a contractor, like your lack of experience is more like tolerated. So like one way that I got my foot in the door was through contracting at Microsoft. It's something that I kind of recommend ambivalently, because like right now, because of COVID and like economic uncertainty, contracting can be really unstable. And I think sometimes a lot of contractors hope that they can convert to full time, but it doesn't always happen. But be aware of risks, and you can just kind of think of contracting as like a stepping stone to something bigger, something better. So, and I think what's great about like contracting at big companies like Microsoft is that they have really great resources even for contractors. So like you can, for instance, look at their big research repository and learn about all the past projects that other researchers have done. Or there might be like a UX book club and you can get to know people. So, you can still utilize really good resources that these companies provide. So, and I think, again, like smaller agencies, they tend to be more willing to hire people with kind of unique backgrounds. So there are lots of small agencies that do like design research consulting or UX research consulting. So like, do research on them online, reach out to them directly. They might be hiring. And finally, yes, this, like, if you are trying to transition into UX research, yes, it's super agonizing and it's super hard out there right now. It's really hard to get a job in UX research. So I think a lot of people in academia tend to think, oh, like it can be like a backup plan. But like if you have that mindset, you're likely to not be able to get a job in UX research, because even people who want to become UX researchers really badly cannot become UX researchers these days. It's just, there are no entry level jobs out there. So, you could take up to like 6 to 8 months or even a year for you to land a position. I've seen many people struggling on like LinkedIn. So, and to get a position that you're completely satisfied with in terms of location, salary, and benefits, it could take like 1 to 2 years. So like you have to be really patient. You have to build your experience. So yes, it's hard. So I think one good thing is like when you're like interviewing, like don't put all your mental eggs in like one basket. Like even if like 1 or 2 interviews go well, like don't think that you might get that job, like because you might not. So just kind of be patient. And yeah, please take time to be kind to yourself, and you have to like do things that can relax you a little bit when you're looking for a job, because it's really hard. So that's all I prepared. So I guess there's only like 15 minutes left, but I want to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Tomo. This was really educational, and you gave us both hope and a reality check. So, but it's nice to know that even though it might take waiting a little bit, that there is perhaps some job opportunities at the end of it. So why don't we turn to the Q&A? If there are any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat.
So if I may begin posing questions to Tomo. First question from Carlos: as anthropologists, we don't have to deal with clients. How do you acquire that specific language or attitude to deal with them?
Yeah, that's a good question. But I think, a lot of anthropologists might work with people who are like clients, right? Like when we are doing field work, we might have to speak to like government officials, or we might have to, work with community leaders, or, you kind of do actually have to work with various stakeholders. And I think, yeah, I think you can kind of use that kind of experience to really understand like what they want, what they're trying to achieve with you, and yeah, kind of propose solutions for them. Think of a good viable research project for them. I think here too, like your critical listening skill is really important, right? You have to be able to like think like them. You have to be able to like talk like them, right? Like, and it's just, especially like when you're working for an agency, like, and you have to be able to do that really quickly. Like you have to be able to learn about their company. You have to be able to kind of pick up like words or concepts that they kind of very naturally use. So I think, here, like you can kind of use your anthropological skills and experience to empathize with your clients and like think in their shoes. So yeah, I think you got the skills. You just don't know that you do. And yeah, you just have to adapt, right?
Thank you. Timothy is asking, are there unique challenges for international students who are interested in your UX career? Visa issues, etc.
That's a very, very good question. And I think the problem is that many anthropology programs, especially like PhD programs, I don't know what your background is, Timothy, but I think they might not even have like programs set up for you to do an internship, and I was an international student as well, and I married an American, so like I didn't really have to worry about work authorization. But yeah, it is a real issue, and like an international student cannot like just easily pick up like contracting work, right, because of visa restrictions. I think I have like maybe two pieces of advice. I think one, you should try to do an internship. You can still, I don't know where you are, Timothy, but I think you can try to work with your school to do an internship if you get one. Obviously, you have to get an internship first, but I think you're likely to be able to work with your school to like allow you to work for like 3 months in summer. I think another thing is, I don't know where you're from, but you can like, UX research is expanding. There are other countries where you can work as a UX researcher. Like I thought about it as well. Like I thought about maybe doing some UX research in Japan just to get that experience. Like I didn't end up doing that, but like I was talking to someone from Russia, and she said like she had the same issue, and she ended up actually getting a job in Moscow, because it was just easier for her. But like she got a UX research position. So, and maybe you might be able to come back to the US if you want to come back after getting some experience. So, yeah.
Thank you. And Aaron's asking, what does a typical UX job interview look like? What to anticipate?
It depends, but usually there are multiple steps. There's usually a phone screen with a recruiter who usually doesn't know much about UX research, or who is not a researcher themselves, right? And if they like you, you usually talk to the hiring manager. And if they like you, I think in many companies, they tend to do like a panel interview where you are asked to walk through like a case study, or where you're asked to walk through your portfolio. So there are behavioral questions that are asked in interviews in general, in any industry interview. There are also technical questions about your research craft. You might be asked to like talk about the difference between qual and quant research, and how you as a more qualitative researcher might use quantitative data, or so there are some like nerdy research questions, but also you're asked to talk about like, say, like how you work with difficult stakeholders who don't understand research, or because like conflict resolution and working with difficult stakeholders is definitely part of many UX research positions. So I've been asked a lot of different questions.
Do we have any more questions?
Last call, folks.
Sami is asking, sorry. Have you found particular PhD programming anthropology, particular education anthropology that is better preparing for UX research?
A PhD program?
Yeah.
Sadly, I don't think any program is doing anything that is preparing anthropologists for UX research. I wish like Stanford, where I went, like given its location in Silicon Valley, could be doing something better. But because it's really like at Stanford, really like almost like 70-80% of graduates, at least in the last 2 to 3 years, have been going into industry, because it's just there are not enough academic jobs, and we've been realizing that maybe industry is better. So I don't think like I don't think the program itself is doing anything, but maybe like having that kind of personal network, or like having people before you doing UX research might kind of be helping. Yeah, if anybody else knows a research program that's actually preparing graduates for UX research, let me know. Jessica Hardin, do you have any advice for those of us training undergraduates? What kind of advice, Jessica? Like what kind of courses could you potentially teach, or? I think maybe one thing that professors could do is to invite like speakers, not necessarily me, but like someone doing like UX research, or like someone just working in industry, to just talk about their experience and how they ended up where they are after studying anthropology. That might be inspiring. Or I think someone at Brandeis, a professor, like I think he's teaching grad students, but he reached out to me the other day, and I think he's teaching a class called like practical ethnography or something. So, I think you can totally design a course and teach undergraduates like some of these UX research skills, right? And like, like let's do diary studies, or let's do usability testing. And, maybe you can team up with other professors in other departments like human computer interaction, or in the design school. I don't know what your institution's like, but I think, it's just universities usually have a lot of resources, but they're not like connected. So I think one thing anthropology professors can do is to team up with professors in other departments. Think more, if you don't have an opportunity of doing an internship, is contracting work a possibility of building a career and being hired as a UX researcher? Yes, definitely. I didn't do an internship, and that door is kind of closed as soon as you graduate, right? So I know tons of people who didn't do an internship and still became UX researchers successfully. So but I think what I can say is usually you have to do like 1 or 2 years of contracting or agency work, or like you have to work in a position that that might not be the most ideal for you for a couple of years before you can kind of get to maybe where you want to be. So Diego, could you talk about generate capture insights that will be appreciated by clients or enterprises? I think, this is something that I'm still working on, because I obviously don't come from a business background, but it's, at least for me, observing non-researchers has been really helpful in terms of like how they think and like how they generate business insights, right? So like I was working at this agency called Round Feather before joining EPAM, and the CEO of the agency, I think he was at Pepsi for like 20 years. So like, how he thought was like really, really different from me. But like, he just kind of understands business really well, right? So kind of like listening to him and how he talks to like clients, or like how he helps like reframe questions, was really helpful for in terms of kind of understanding how to do it well. I don't feel that I do it well, or at least as well as him. But I think, kind of learning from other people is always good, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think we're reaching the end of our hour. I want to thank Tomo Sugimoto for speaking to us tonight. We really appreciate your insights, your time, the effort you put into the slide presentation. I think it's been very helpful to all of us. I want to thank Rafael Munilla for keeping me afloat technologically, and I want to thank all of you for checking in with us tonight. Again, if you look in the chat, you'll find a link to all of our March webinar events, and we hope to see some of you again. We do have one of our next speakers here in the audience. Mandeep Basai will be speaking on Monday evening. That's in the chat, and also there's information about the AES, and we encourage you to join us. So thank you everyone for coming tonight, and we hope to see you soon.